less maintenance is $1,000 per year every year that you save because you have an EV.
Thank you, Senator. Finally, Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Turk, thank you for being here. Nice to see you again. Thanks to both of the witnesses for being here. I wanted to talk a little bit about who is really benefiting from this administration's climate agenda and from these draconian electric vehicle mandates. So, Mr. Turk, you've already alluded to this. I know you know the answer to these questions. Currently, one nation accounts for 60% of the world's electric vehicle production. That nation is?
China.
Yeah. One nation accounts for 76% of the world's lithium-ion battery production. That nation is?
China.
Yet your administration, this president's administration, the mandates that you put in place require that 2/3 of our new vehicle sales in just the next 8 years, 2/3 of them, be electric vehicles. Your policies are driving us and our supply chains into the hands of our greatest geostrategic enemy, enriching them, enriching their government, while forcing Americans to pay for electric vehicles that on average cost $7,000 more on average than a traditional vehicle, are more expensive to repair and insure, require more frequent replacements of everything from tires to component parts. So, Mr. Turk, why is it good for the American worker that we force our supply chains to a country that's our greatest rival and adversary? And why is it good for the American consumer?
So this is exactly why we're using all the tools that Congress gave us to diversify our supply chains, from the mining piece and especially the processing piece, which is where China really has a stranglehold. So we're making significant progress on lithium, on graphite, you name it, the tools that you all have given us to diversify those supply chains and make sure that we're getting the benefits of that. Our U.S. workers are getting the benefits of that. Citizens in St. Louis, I mentioned in my opening statement some exciting investments that are going on in St. Louis. We want U.S. Workers to benefit from this supply chain and this revolution. And China is absolutely competing. China is going whole hog on EVs and the full supply chain of it. And they're going to compete and outcompete unless we're playing and pushing back and competing with them, which is what we're doing.
Here's what I don't understand then. Why is it, if that is the case, why is it that you are interpreting the administration's climate law, so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which I think, frankly, is bad enough on its own, but you're reinterpreting it now to allow the tax credits to flow to Chinese entities. So now U.S. tax dollars are literally subsidizing Chinese battery makers. Why would we want to do that? Why would we want to not only give our adversary our supply chains and our jobs, but pay them to take them from us? Why does that make any sense?
So I would argue, and certainly want to turn to my Deputy Secretary at Treasury, we are not doing that.
How are you not?
The fact that with the 30D tax credit, only 13 models qualify at this point. Now, we hope more diversification happens and more models qualify for that tax credit is a good data point that we take this very seriously, and we want to have these jobs in the U.S. But let me
wait. I just want to stay with you, Mr. Turk, just because my time is so limited, and this is an important part. And the chairman's brought this up, and I'm glad that he has. This is really, really important. The Inflation Reduction Act, which I did not vote for, but nevertheless, the Inflation Reduction Act said clearly that China, if you are a foreign entity of concern, you don't, which includes China, you don't get the taxpayer subsidy. You don't get the 30D subsidy. You don't get the tax break. And yet your rule allows Chinese companies to get the tax break. It loosens up the restrictions. So now we are subsidizing our rivals. I just don't understand. The chairman's asked you about this repeatedly. I don't understand why we would pay Chinese companies to outcompete us.
So I would strongly disagree with that. I spent a lot of time working with the team, and we worked hand in hand with our Treasury colleagues on the FEOC, the Foreign Entity of Concern, the FEOC standards, and happy to go through the three prongs of that in particular in terms of what our proposal is on the table.
Well, that's the problem, right? Is that the law, which again I didn't support, but the law says just no. It says no. And then you come back and say, it's what we lawyers like to call a multi-factor balancing test, which is usually what courts do when they want to get their way. So it's like, oh, well, let's complicate it. We've got all of these different things. And the effect of it is, this has been widely reported. This isn't my opinion. Everybody understands that what it does is it allows Chinese companies, so long as they're not set up within mainland China, but owned and controlled by China, they can now get the tax credit. I just don't understand why we would use our tax money to pay the Chinese to make these vehicles.
So we're not. Only 13 models, again, have qualified for that 30D tax credit. A lot of companies right now, automakers, are scrambling and they're working urgently to make sure that they don't have that.
If your rule had no effect, why would you change it? Why wouldn't you just leave the text of the IRA in place? Why wouldn't you, the flat bar?
All of this is implementing the legislation that's been passed, and happy again to get into the details. Certainly if
Last thing I've got, because my time's expired, I know other senators are waiting to ask questions, but this is important, just about the effect on American workers. Just looking at the news reporting on this, if Ford CEO says that EVs are going to require 40% less labor to produce than traditional cars, as production is shifting to the United States, this labor on, for instance, batteries, EV batteries, is increasingly being done in factories that are co-owned at least by foreign entities, and the wages for workers who are usually not unionized are substantially less than the wages for workers in traditional cars. Now, you mentioned my state. In Wentzville, Missouri, for example, we have almost 4,000 workers in a GM plant there. That's just one plant in just one area of my state. Believe me, I'll take all the jobs you can give me. But I don't want those 3,000 workers to lose their jobs and to have another couple hundred created in some other state in a factory co-owned by a foreign company making half the wages. And that seems to be the trade-off that you're offering to American workers. That doesn't seem like a good trade-off to me. With that, I yield, Mr. Chairman. If you want to respond, Mr. Chair, go ahead, but I yield, Mr. Chairman.
I just reiterate the number of jobs, 136,000 jobs, thanks to these tools that you've given us, thanks to this president, all across the country, including in St. Louis, but all across the country. That's an incredible record, and there are incentives, as the chairman well knows, to make sure these are good-paying jobs that we have all across the country.
Senator Hickenlooper. Senator Hawley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, nice to see you again. When you were here last, I talked with you about the fact that more than 130 officials in the Energy Department reported more than 2,700 trades of shares, bonds, and options in companies that ethics officers said was directly related to the agency's work. This is institutionalized corruption. And I asked you point blank, do you own any individual stock? And you told me, no. Let's just look at it. It was not a difficult question. Do you own individual stocks, Madam Secretary? You said no. In fact, you repeated it 3 times to me. No, no, no. Turns out that was false. You did own multiple individual stocks, and you neglected to report it to this committee for months afterwards. Why did you mislead this committee?
Oh, my goodness.
That was exactly my response. So why did
Senator,
you mislead this committee?
I believed that I had sold all individual stocks, and I was incorrect. So I came back.
You just don't
and
know your
told,
portfolio?
Pretty much.
It's a big one, I guess, huh?
No, it's extremely small.
Apparently not. Someone manages it for you?
So I came back as soon as I found out that, in fact, I had not sold all individuals.
Wait. No, that's not true either. Let's just look at the timeline. Let's not, I just remind you, you're under oath. Madam Secretary, you testified you didn't own any individual stocks. You didn't sell the stocks for a whole nother month. And after you sold the stocks, you waited another month before you informed this committee. Why did you mislead us, and what were you hiding? Why did you wait so long? Why did you hide this?
I did not hide it because I brought it forth to the committee when I realized that we had made a mistake.
Really? What explains the delay? Why did you wait for a full month to explain your actions to this committee, your false testimony?
That's less than a month, and I sent a letter explaining what had happened.
May the
that I made a
15th to
mistake
June the 9th. Are we
because
going
I
to?
owned a Ford stock that was...
You misled this committee, and you wait. What were the stocks? What were the stocks that you owned?
It was a Ford stock that my husband had owned since he was very young, and I just was not aware of it.
And what were the others? You sold 6 stocks. What were the other 5?
I sold non-conflicting stocks.
What were they?
Honestly, I don't even know. I do know the Ford one because that was a conflict.
You don't.
That's why I raised this.
You're here before this committee a year later after actively misleading us, after denying and delaying, and now you won't tell us. Was one of them Proterra?
No.
You sat on the board of directors at Proterra. You made millions, CNN reports, and stock options at Proterra. Then you promoted Proterra stock and Proterra products as
did
energy
not. Sir,
secretary. Was
sir,
that one of the
sir.
stocks that you sold?
This is so, I mean, really.
Was that one of the stocks that
Really?
you sold? Yes,
No,
really.
no,
You
it
are
was-
presiding over institutionalized corruption in your energy department. You have
so sorry
violated
that-
the Stock Act 9 separate times. You have been referred by the Inspector General for violations of the Hatch Act. It is institutionalized corruption that you are now the face of. And here's what I'm trying to figure out. I just want to know who really runs the energy department. Is it you, or is it the mega corporations whose stock that you own that you're making profits in?
Oh, my goodness.
Or maybe it's the foreign billionaires who fund your conferences. Let's try something else. Do you know the names of the foreign billionaires who fund the conferences you go to? Since you don't know the stocks, do you know the names of the foreign billionaires?
This is unbelievable to me.
Let me help you.
Mr. Chairman,
One of
to
them
be
is
accused like
Hans-Georg
this.
Weiss, a Swiss billionaire who has used various dark money front
I do
groups
not know what you
to
are
funnel
talking about.
various dark money front groups to funnel foreign money into American politics. He has used the Burger Action Fund, $20 million, that then sent money to the Fund for a Better Future, that then sent money to the Climate Power Group that has funded conferences you've attended. Do you know who this is? Do you think it's a good idea to attend conferences funded by foreign billionaires?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
You don't know the stocks, you don't know the billionaires, you would take no responsibility.
Ford stock.
Meanwhile, your energy department, executives in your energy department are trading stocks in companies that they have direct oversight over, and you were too.
That is incorrect.
It's a
Nobody
fact.
in the Department of Energy, and we have a strong ethics office, does not trade stocks in anything that they have oversight over.
That is
People may
that
own
is simply
individual
not
stocks.
true, Madam Secretary.
Sir,
the Wall
this
Street
is-
Journal has reported on this
Senator, if I may.
extensively.
Wall Street
If I
Journal.
may, Senator, if I may just ask the question, is it possible that maybe we can continue this at a later time? But if you had any questions on the direct energy policies?
Mr. Chairman, this is directly relevant to institutionalized corruption in the Department of Energy that she oversees. You were, I think, about to say that the Wall Street Journal report's wrong.
The Wall Street Journal report did not say that people over whom they were in areas where they were directly overseeing had stocks. They did not. Our ethics office consults with all of our employees that need to be that have a reporting requirement about their stock holdings. They do not own stocks in areas that they have any influence over, nor do I.
Madam Secretary, all I have to say is this record is just deplorable. It is despicable. It is outrageous that hundreds of officers in the Energy Department are trading shares. It is
Incorrect.
outrageous that you misled
incorrect.
us. It is outrageous
Incorrect.
that you
That
are
is
continuing to
incorrect.
mislead us, and it is outrageous you're going to conferences and events funded by foreign billionaires using dark money to try to influence our politics. This has got to change, and frankly, you should go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Lee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, let's just come back to Jose Ibarra, if we can. You know who that is? That's a question. You know what he did,
I know what he's accused of doing,
which is,
murdering a young woman.
and that wasn't the first crime that he committed in this country, was it?
Senator, as I've articulated previously, I'm not going to speak about the facts of the case because there is an ongoing criminal investigation.
Have you read his parole file?
Senator, same answer.
So you're not going to say whether or not you've read the parole file? I've got it right here. Have you read this?
Senator, I do not want to speak to the particulars of the case given the pending criminal
Now,
prosecution.
I find this interesting because this is a new answer today. You've changed your answers all over the map on this, and it looks like to me you just don't want to answer the question. 2 days ago, you were asked about this in the House Homeland Security Committee. I've got the transcript right here in front of me. You were asked the same question. Jose Ibarra, why was he paroled? You said, I don't know. You said, I don't know. I don't have the case details with me today. Congressman Bishop says, you don't know? And you said, I don't know. I don't have the details with respect to that individual's case, but I would be pleased to provide them to you, Congressman. You didn't know 2 days ago. Now, interestingly, on April the 10th, 6 days before that, you gave Senator Katie Britt a different answer. She asked you the same question. She said, why was Jose Ibarra paroled into the United States? You said, and I quote, Ranking Member Britt, there was no derogatory information of which we were aware. So you were happy to comment on the case then, on April the 10th. By April the 16th, you had developed amnesia, and today you say you just won't comment. So which is it, Mr. Secretary? Now that we have the file, I'll tell you what the difference is. Congressman Bishop didn't have the parole file, and Senator Britt didn't have the parole file, and now we do have the parole file. And now we all know that the reason he was paroled into this country was because lack of detention capacity, which, as you and I both know, is not a valid reason under the statute. And now that we know that for sure, this is right out of the parole file. Here it is. Subject was paroled due to detention capacity at the Central Processing Center in El Paso, Texas. Now suddenly you don't want to talk about it. This is extraordinary. It's also a pattern with you. So let me just try one more time. Have you read the parole file?
Senator, I'm going to give the same answer, and let me say it.
Well, which one? Are you going to give me the answer you gave to Senator Britt? Are you going to give the answer you gave to Congressman Bishop, or the answer you gave to Senator Paul, or do you want to try a fourth one?
Senator, I will not speak to the particulars of the case, given the pending criminal prosecution.
Yeah, well, I'm sure. Well, you certainly, of course you don't want to, because it is an absolutely damning indictment of your policies. Let's just review Jose Ibarra, and how he came to be here. On September the 8th, 2022, he was encountered by United States Border Patrol in El Paso, Texas, and was paroled into the United States due to lack of detention capacity. A provision, a proviso, a rule that is not permitted under the statute. You and I both know you know this. You knew it when you were talking to Congressman Bishop. You knew it when you were testifying to Senator Britt, and you know it today. You just never wanted to cop to it, because the statute doesn't permit it. And so you lied to Congressman Bishop, and you lied to Senator Britt. And now you are hiding behind the ongoing prosecution excuse, because it's the last one left to you, because you testified falsely under oath. Then on July 19th, 2023, Ibarra reports for a biometric appointment and was fingerprinted. This is now in New York. The results come back and indicate he has a criminal history. So he's in this country, he has a criminal history. September 14th, he is arrested in New York by NYPD for what? Injuring a child. September 14th, 2023, he is arrested for injuring a child. What happens? The offense was never prosecuted, and the arrest was expunged. I'm reading right out of the parole file. Expunged. Nothing is done to this guy. He had a criminal record to start with. He's in the country on illegal grounds. You have falsely and illegally allowed him in. He commits a crime against a child. He's not prosecuted. It's expunged. In November, get this, in November, Ibarra files an application for employment authorization. And unbelievably, on December the 9th, 2023, it's approved. So this is your policies in action, Mr. Secretary. A criminal is permitted into this country on grounds flatly not permitted, flatly contradictory to the statute. He commits a crime against a child, and then he gets a work permit. He gets a work permit. You want to know why all of the jobs in the last 2 or 3 years have gone to illegal migrants? Working people in this country can't get a job. Their unemployment rate's high. Why? Because of things like this. And then what's he do? Well, we all know. Then in February, he commits the heinous crime against Laken Riley. Is this a record that you are proud of?
Senator, you've misstated some facts.
I have read from the parole file, which you have said you don't recall, don't have, you miscited. I'm reading from it. It is right here. And I've just, pursuant to the speech and debate clause, I have just read it into the record. And the reason is, you have lied repeatedly to Congress and to the American people about this. They deserve to know. And the only way they're going to know is if I tell them. I've just told them. It's in the record now. I've read it verbatim from the parole file. Verbatim. I just want to know, why did you change your story so often? Why didn't you just answer honestly to Congressman Bishop and Senator Britt?
Senator, I am confident that justice will be vindicated in the criminal prosecution of the case.
Well, hopefully he'll get more of a trial than you got. Otherwise, there'll be no justice for anyone at all. Let me ask you something else. Travis Wolf, do you know that name?
Not off the top of my head.
Travis Wolf is a 12-year-old boy from Missouri. This is him. Travis was killed on December 20th, 2023, or I should say he was in a tragic attack on that night. He died some weeks later, head-on collision. The person driving the vehicle, who's now been charged with 6 criminal counts, is Indrina Bracco. Do you know who that is?
I do not, but let me communicate that I know that all of our hearts break for the family of this young boy who died in that accident.
Well, she's an illegal migrant here from Venezuela. Local law enforcement tell me that she was detained briefly at the border in 2023 and then released. And then she commits this crime. Multiple people have been stabbed in O'Fallon, Missouri by illegal migrants. Mr. Secretary, I know that you think your policies are a success. You've sat right there in that chair and you've told me over and over our policies are working. You're on the record years and years saying that. Maybe they're working for you. Maybe they're working for your political objectives, whatever they may be. I don't know. But they're not working for Laken Riley or Travis Wolf or the people of my state. They are, in fact, a travesty. What you have done is a travesty. And, sir, it is long past time for you to go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hassan, you're recognized for your questions.
Well, thank you, Chairman Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Holland, do you know the group called the Wilderness Society?
I've heard of it, yes.
And what, to your knowledge, what is this group?
It sounds like the name is explanatory.
Well, let me help you a little bit. It's a left-wing environmentalist pressure group. Do you know who funds them?
I do not.
Well, I can help you with that, too. It's funded in large part by a foreign billionaire, Hans-Jörg Weiss, who has routed his money through all manner of dark money groups, including the Arabella Network. Hans-Jörg Weiss was investigated by the FEC for illegal campaign contributions because he's not a United States citizen. He sits on the governing council of this dark money environmentalist group. Has anybody in leadership at your department met with them, the Wilderness Society?
Senator, I do not know this individual, and
Has anybody in leadership at your department met with the Wilderness Society?
Well, I'm sure we've met with a lot of groups and organizations in the work that we do, and we're discussing the environment.
So does that mean you don't know, or you're not going to answer my
I
question?
don't have a full list of everyone
Okay.
that everyone has met with. But
Well, I can help you with that
Have a
as
specific
I can help you with that
question,
as
have
well.
to
The
try to
answer is yes. Your leadership has met with the Wilderness Society. They met with the Wilderness Society when that group was a plaintiff suing the Department of the Interior with an adverse lawsuit against you, and they met with them off the books. I've got the emails. In July of 2021, after you had come to office, members of the Wilderness Society, when they're suing the department, write to your top deputy and ask for a meeting to keep it off of his calendar. Here it is, July 14th, 2021. Can we set up a meeting with these folks? July 19th, 2021, they propose how they might calibrate this so it doesn't look like they're violating any of the rules of the court. And remarkably, it stays completely off of everybody's calendars. We only know about it because FOIA requests were filed. And then after they have these off-the-books meetings, their request is to cancel the mineral leasing rights in Minnesota in the Superior National Forest. This is a critical minerals mine. The society wants the mine shut down. After they meet off the books with your leadership, you do it. A few months later, you do it. You cancel the leases, and then you withdraw 225,000 acres of critical mining from production and leasing shortly after that. Is it common practice at your department to meet with dark money groups off the books and conceal it from the public?
Senator, thank you for the question. And of course, I can't answer to, if you're referring to our former deputy secretary, he's no longer at the department.
Who worked for you?
He worked for the president. He was appointed by the president.
He's your deputy secretary. Are you the secretary of the Department of Interior? I thought that's why you were here. Are you the secretary? Don't look at her, look at me.
Yes.
Are you the secretary?
I am.
Do these people who are sitting here today answering most of your questions, do they work for you?
They work.
Do they report for you? You're not in charge?
They work with me.
They work with
They
you.
work
So
as
you're
a
not in
team.
charge of the department. Oh my gosh, I thought you were in charge. I thought that's why you were here.
We work as a team.
Oh, okay. So who's in charge then?
I provide the vision. I provide the overall direction and
But you're not in charge.
our mission.
Do you take responsibility for what happens
I
at the
take-
Department of the Interior?
Take responsibility.
Do you take
for
full responsibility for what happens at the Department of the Interior? Good. Then why are your leadership meeting with dark money groups and concealing it from the public. Why are they doing it off the books? How many times has this happened?
Senator, this is the first I'm hearing of this. My deputy secretary is no longer there, and I can't answer to what he did when he was there.
What did they get out of it, do you suppose? What do you suppose Hans-Jörg Weiss got out of you canceling the leases after they asked you to?
I don't know who
in an off-the-books reading.
I don't know who this individual
Oh, sure. I mean, you don't know. You're not in charge. You're not responsible. We have a corruption problem in this government, Madam Secretary, and frankly, we have a corruption problem in your department.
We don't.
We've got we certainly do. We have foreign billionaires who are funding dark money groups coming to meet with your leadership, concealing it from the public while they are filing lawsuits adverse to the department, doing it without the court's knowledge, doing it, you say, without your knowledge, and then getting exactly what they want. Now, I don't know how much money he made off of it. I'm sure it was a lot. I know how he made his money. He made his money by poisoning people. Hans-Jörg Weiss, here's what his company did. In 2009, Synthes USA, with Weiss at its head, was charged by Philadelphia's U.S. attorney with running an illegal clinical trial on humans. They injected them with a cement that turns to bone inside the human skeleton. That's the guy who's funding this group, who's pressuring your department, and you're meeting with them off the books
Senator,
and giving them exactly what they want.
I did not meet with him. You're implying that I met with him.
I'm just trying to figure out who's in charge of the Interior Department. You've said it isn't you. It sounds to me like it's the billionaires. It sounds to me like it's the dark money billionaires who are calling the shots at the Department of the Interior. And all I have to say to you, Madam Secretary, is that is a travesty. It is a travesty. The American people should be in charge, not the foreign billionaires. And the fact that you've let them run rampant is outrageous. It's outrageous.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Hawley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. DeJoy, nice to see you. I want to talk to you about the post office facility in Bering, Missouri. Back in August of this last year, the post office there was closed after severe tornado damage. Missouri is right in sort of tornado alley. It has not reopened since then. So in September, I wrote to you asking about a timeline to have the post office reopened. Your office wrote back later that month and said probably 90 days there would be a timeline announced. We didn't hear anything, so in January, I wrote again with the chairman, actually Chairman Peters. We wrote asking about a timeline. I don't think I've gotten a response to that letter. Here's the Bering post office at the moment. It doesn't exist. So this community, this is a rural community in my state. They don't have a post office at all. And what bothers me is I haven't heard anything about the timeline for getting it rebuilt. So can I just ask for an update on that?
Yes.
Do you have one?
I do not have an update on the Bering.
I'm sorry.
I do not have one, but I will get it to you.
Okay. Can we get one? I don't want to belabor the point here, but because I think we've heard it now from multiple people, but in rural Missouri, you know, this community, I mean, you see it. There's no post office here. They can't get prescription drugs. They can't get their bills on time. They can't get any. I mean, they're just stranded. So I'm frustrated here by the fact that it's been months and months, and I was told 90 days in September, and this is now the middle of April, and here we are. So I'd like to get your help on this for these good folks. Let me ask you then about some delivery issues. In the Kansas City area, we have seen a tripling of casework reports in Kansas City, folks who are saying they're just not getting the mail. I mean, they're not getting it on time. It was so significant, I asked the Inspector General to look into it and to recommend some action items to improve this. I mean, I just had constituents telling me that at the end of March, they were finally getting their Christmas cards. I mean, this is not good. And this is happening in Kansas City. It's also, frankly, happening in St. Louis on the other side of the state. So can you just give me an update on the implementation of the Inspector General's recommendations for improving service in Kansas City, or maybe you know something about the Kansas City situation, and it would be helpful to hear.
As I I don't know where I reported, but right before peak season, we had a major transportation contractor go out of business. They had a big transfer hub in Kansas City. They actually had 8, that we had about 5,000 truckloads of mail and packages going in and out of these places. So we had to distribute that around quickly over several weeks, around 20 locations around the nation, and reroute 5,000 truckloads in and out. Kansas City was not great on service to begin with, and this just complicated the issue. We're starting to recover on it, and I think you should see gradually improving service in the area.
Well, good. I mean, I hope it'll be more than gradual. It is. I mean, I know I don't need to tell you this, but it's just incredibly frustrating for folks not to be able to get their mail and to have it go on for months and months. And it's the Kansas City area. I'm getting a lot of complaints out of the St. Louis area. So this is just it's got to be a priority. I want to ask you to be sure to tell all of the postal workers how grateful I am for them. I know that they're doing hard work. I'm proud of the work that they're doing, and we rely on them. You know, my state, my gosh, we rely on them. We're a majority rural state, so you know, places like Bering, little town where I grew up, Lexington, other places. Boy, we are grateful for our postal workers, and we are grateful for our post offices. And I know it's something the chairman and I talk about a lot. We don't want to see post offices closed in rural parts of this country, and we want to see the mail delivered on time. So please thank them for me for all that they're doing, and thank you for your attention to these issues. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I start, Mr. Chairman, I want to say thank you for your strong statement on the RICA legislation yesterday, and for your leadership on this issue. It's much appreciated. Director Stone Manning, let me just start with this. When you came before this committee in 2021, this is before I was a member of the committee, you were asked as part of your confirmation whether you'd ever been investigated, arrested, charged by any federal, state, or local law enforcement authority for the violation of any federal, state, or local law, regulation, or ordinance other than a minor traffic offense. We asked that question of all people before the committee. You answered no. Do you stand by that testimony?
Senator, I do stand by that testimony and was proud to be confirmed to do this job.
What's tree spiking, Director?
Senator, again, this committee engaged quite a bit in
No, that's a factual question. Do you know what it is?
And I do. It is.
You want to tell us? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's when people illegally put metal objects into trees so that they prevent a timber sale.
What happens if a chainsaw hits a spike?
Sometimes when a chainsaw hits a spike, it can buck the saw.
Yeah, violently recoil, potentially kill or seriously maim the loggers.
Yeah, which is why I notified the federal authorities that I had heard that happened.
Loggers like, for instance, George Alexander, this is from an article on the Washington Post explaining what happens when trees get spiked. Loggers who are blue-collar workers, by the way. These are not wealthy people. These are not people who have had the advantages perhaps you and others have had. People like George Alexander, who, for example, in May 1987, at age 23, his chainsaw hit a tree spike. I'm quoting, his face was slashed from eye to chin, his teeth were smashed, his jaw was cut in half. That's a typical reaction when a logger hits a spike. Now, you just said, I think just a second ago, that you were involved. There were 2 people convicted in 1989 of putting 500 pounds of spikes in an Idaho forest. Senator Rich mentioned this just a moment ago. You testified you sent a letter to the Forest Service on their behalf. I have it here. The letter says, among other things, this letter sent to notify you that the post office sale, that's the forest sale in Idaho, has been spiked heavily. The reason for this action is that this piece of land is very special to the earth. It is home to the elk, deer, mountain lions, birds, and especially the trees. It goes on, I would be more than willing to pay you $1 for the sale, but you'd have to find me first, and that could be your worst nightmare. P.S. You bastards go in there anyway, and a lot of people could get hurt. Why'd you send this?
Senator, as I said at the time, over 30 years ago, a really angry and turns out violent person handed me that letter and said, will you send this to the Forest Service?
And you did. Why?
What you just talked about in 1987 to a logger, this is 1988, 9. I understood that people could get hurt.
Why didn't you notify the federal authorities? Why did you send this threatening letter on behalf of these 2 men who were convicted of crimes?
I was terrified of them and wanted no involvement with them.
So you wanted no involvement, but you sent a letter that says you bastards go in there anyway and a lot of people could get hurt? Why didn't you just contact the FBI or anybody, any local authority?
because the person who did this act threatened people's lives if they disclosed who did it.
Yeah, in fact, you were investigated for being involved, weren't you? Here we have a letter sent to this committee from the special agent of the USDA Forest Service, Michael Merkley, who was in charge of the investigation. He says, and he details this in the letter to this committee, that he investigated you for your involvement. He says, and I'm going to quote now, grand jury subpoenas were issued for hair samples, handwriting exemplars, fingerprints. These subpoenas were served on persons suspected of being involved, having knowledge of the incident, including Ms. Tracy Stone Manning. You've testified you were never investigated, ever for anything. Why'd you lie to this committee?
Senator, this committee delved deeply, went into the court records where I testified against these men.
Were you issued subpoenas?
No.
You were not issued subpoenas?
I was issued a subpoena to appear before a grand jury with
Really?
with
Because
about 13
here's what he
people.
says. Ms. Stone Manning was extremely difficult to work with. She was antagonistic. She was uncooperative, refused to provide her hair, handwriting exemplars, and fingerprints as ordered by the grand jury. It was not until after we informed her she would be arrested if she did not comply with the subpoenas that she provided the samples to me. So you were subpoenaed.
Senator Hawley,
you
your
were
time
the
is
target of an
expired.
investigation.
Do you have a question?
You were the target of an investigation. You lied to this committee. Why?
Senator, I never received a target letter. I'm curious, I understand why this committee jumped over 30 years of my career in considering my nomination and went to a salacious moment from graduate school where I tried to protect people. What I don't understand is why we're not looking at the last 3.5 years now.
Here's why.
Senator
It's because people are killed in these kind of incidents. It is an act of terrorism.
Your time is expired.
A special agent in charge found that you were involved. You lied to this committee in saying that you were never investigated.
Senator
you were never
Hawley.
the target of investigation. In fact, you were.
Your time
You lied to us
is
blatantly.
expired.
And you know it. Everywhere you look, this country is in chaos, is it not? Look at our southern border. That border is wide open. Every sovereign country in the history of the world has had a border that is enforceable, that says who belongs to the country, who believes in the country, who loves the country, and who does not. But our border is wide open, and what's happening? People are pouring across it. Just yesterday morning in the state of Missouri, Missouri Highway Patrol arrested 5 illegal migrants who had kidnapped a young girl from the state of Indiana, taken her across state lines. It was 2 in the morning, 2:54 a.m., that a Missouri highway patrolman pulled over these 5 migrants and rescued that girl. And that is happening everywhere across this country. Yeah, thank them for that. They deserve our thanks. Drugs are pouring into my state, every school in my state. You can go and buy illegal drugs. Where are they coming from? Across the southern border. Stabbings, murders, Lake and Riley. It's all too common. It's all too typical. And it is all because of Joe Biden and the radical left agenda. And listen, you and I both know why the border's open. The border is wide open because they want to tear down America. They want to change this country. That's what they're trying to do. Boy, and that's just the beginning of it. You talk about chaos. You talk about a radical agenda. You talk about them coming for our heritage. Look what they are doing with the abuse of our legal system. We've got the best legal system, the proudest system of law and order in the world, in the history of the world. And now, what are they doing? Did you see the news yesterday from the state of Texas, where the Department of Justice, our Department of Justice, funded with your taxpayer money, just indicted a Texas doctor who had the courage to stand up and say that a Texas so-called children's hospital was performing illegal gender sterilization surgeries. Did you see this? This brave whistleblower, he's a doctor, he found out that this hospital, in violation of state law, was performing sterilization surgeries on children. He brought this information to the public. He brought the truth forward, and the Biden Justice Department doesn't reward him. They don't thank him. They don't honor him. They indict him. They're going to try to put him into jail. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you, if this is allowed to stand, the United States of America will not stand. This will be the end of our country. And I would just say this. to the Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland, to the FBI Director, Christopher Wray, preserve all of your documents. Preserve all of your decision papers, because what has happened to this man is going to happen to you. We are coming for you. We're going to hold hearings. We're going to put you under oath. We're going to find out who did this. And we're going to turn it around. I tell you what, Republicans are going to take back the Senate come this fall. And when we do, there's going to be accountability. We will not allow this abuse to go forward any longer. Not any longer. And I just want to tell you what. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Rowe, can you put your first poster, your first demonstrative back up?
Please put A up, please.
Let's make sure everybody can see it. This is the photograph, I believe, that you took, your team took of the roof, the AGR roof. Yeah, that's the one. Okay. So from this vantage point, as the law enforcement who are in those windows, as they look left, they should be able to see the shooter clearly there on the AGR second floor roof. My question is, why is there not a Secret Service counter sniper on that roof?
So, Senator, we're when we post up, our methodology is to look at things that can see in on our protectees, so that they can provide that coverage.
But why is there not a Secret Service counter sniper there with clear line of sight? That roof has a clear line of sight to the former president. Why didn't you put a Secret Service counter sniper there?
The Secret Service's counter sniper role is to neutralize those threats that are looking in on us from where the protectee is, not necessarily
You think maybe you might want to revise that protocol in light of what happened here?
They were protecting the principal, and I think
the principal got shot.
I understand that, sir.
So do you think you might want to revise the protocol? Let me ask you this. Who was the lead site agent who made the decision to leave the AGR building completely outside of the security perimeter? Who was that?
Senator, I cannot give you that name. This person is operational. They're still doing investigations. They're still doing protective visits.
Have they been relieved of duty?
Senator, they have not been relieved of duty.
I know their name, by the way. Why have they not been relieved of duty?
They are still cooperating, not only being interviewed by the FBI, but also by our Office of Professional Responsibility. And we will let the facts of the mission assurance and any further investigations play out.
Isn't the fact that a former president was shot, that a good American is dead, that other Americans were critically wounded, isn't that enough mission failure for you to say that the person who decided that that building should not be in the security perimeter probably ought to be stepped down?
Senator, I think you're using the word decided, and I think we need to allow the investigation play out to include.
So who did make the decision then? If it wasn't the lead site agent, who made the decision not to put that in the security perimeter?
Senator, you're zeroing in on one particular agent. I want to find out exactly what was the entire decision process. So I think I want to be neutral and make sure that we get to the bottom of it and interview everybody in order to determine if there was more than one person who perhaps exercised bad judgment.
Well, sure. My question is, why don't you relieve everybody of duty who made bad judgment? So yeah, you're right. I am zeroing in on somebody. I'm trying to find somebody who's accountable here.
And
you're telling me that the person who made the decision not to include this in the perimeter has not been relieved of duty. What about the person who's in charge of the interoperability of radio frequencies between local law enforcement and Secret Service? Has that person been relieved of duty?
No, Senator, because interoperability is a challenge, is a greater challenge than just one person. On that day, we had a counterpart system. It failed
As the person who made the decision to send Donald Trump onto stage knowing that you had a security situation, has that person been relieved of duty?
No, sir, they haven't.
Has the person who decided not to pull the former president off of stage when you knew that, in your words, the locals were working a serious security situation, has that person been relieved of duty?
No, sir. Again, I refer you back to my original answer that we are investigating this through a mission assurance. And as opposed to zeroing in on one,
what more do you need to investigate to know
exactly what the decision-making process was?
What more do you need to investigate to know that there were critical enough failures that some individuals ought to be held accountable? I mean, what more do you need to know?
What I need to know is exactly what happened, and I need my investigators to do their job. And I cannot.
A lot of people didn't do their jobs.
I cannot put my thumb on the scale. Otherwise,
what do you mean put your thumb on the scale?
You're asking me, Senator, to completely make a rush to judgment about somebody failing. I acknowledge This was a failure of the
Is it
Secret
not
Service.
prima facie that somebody has failed? A former president was shot.
Sir, this could have been our Texas school book depository. I have lost sleep over that for the last 17 days,
Then
just like you
fire
have.
somebody to
And I will
hold
tell
them
you,
accountable.
Senator, I will tell you, Senator, that I will not rush to judgment, that people will be held accountable, and I will do so with integrity and not rush to judgment and put people
I can't believe
unfairly
that you
persecuted.
are unfairly persecuted.
Unfairly,
We've got people
sir,
who are
we
dead.
have to be able to have a proper investigation into this, Senator.
You said earlier that you've got to make sure that your protocols are followed, and unless there's a protocol violation, people wouldn't be disciplined. I would just say to you, I don't really care that much about your protocols. I think if your protocols don't provide for the fact that when a former president is shot, when an American is killed, when other rally-goers, innocent people who just showed up on the day, when they are shot at and critically wounded, if that isn't a protocol violation prima facie, you should revise your protocols.
Senator, I think this is where you and I agree. This was a failure, and we will get to the bottom of it.
Well, I hope you're going to do something about it. Let me ask you something else. The Real Clear Politics reports this morning that you were directly involved in denying additional security resources and personnel, including counter snipers, not just to this event, but over the last 2 years, that President Trump's team repeatedly asked for these additional resources, and you personally were involved in denying them. Is that true?
Senator, as I stated earlier, that is not true.
So you never denied any resources to former President Trump's team?
No, not me. No, sir.
And
Not
you
personally.
weren't involved in any of that? You
No,
were never
sir, I
involved
was
in the
not.
decision-making?
No, sir, I was not.
Let me ask you just one or two other things here quickly. Well, whistleblowers tell me that, in fact, law enforcement were stationed to be on that roof and that law enforcement abandoned their post because it was too hot. Is that accurate?
Senator, I have heard that as well. Again, they posted up inside. And I think moving forward, as I said earlier, we're going to ensure that state and local counter snipers are on roofs.
But do you know if someone was supposed to be on the roof? Do you know if someone was in fact? That's what the whistleblowers tells me. That may or may not be accurate. Do you know that to be the fact? Was somebody posted to the roof, local law enforcement or whomever?
I do not know that to be a fact.
Well, can I ask you why you don't know that?
Again, Senator, we are looking at this, and they should have been on that roof. And the fact that they were in the building is something that I'm still trying to understand.
I just want to express my frustration, Director, that 17 days or whatever it's been, that whistleblowers are telling us more than you are, and you don't know, you haven't ascertained if there was supposed to be law enforcement on the roof. That seems like a pretty basic fact. I'm also told that local law enforcement suppliers offered the Secret Service drones, and you declined them. Is that true?
So, Senator, one, I've been very transparent and forthcoming.
Your agency has not been transparent and forthcoming, so please, let's not go there.
I have been forthcoming, sir.
That remains to be seen. You've been on the job a few days. So far, you've fired nobody. Now, the drones.
Thank you,
Were
Senator.
you offered drones?
Senator
So there
Hawley.
was an offer to fly a drone on that day.
And why did you deny it?
Again, I think the ability of local law enforcement to provide an asset, we probably should have taken them up on it if it was offered.
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Johnson. Mr. Whitaker, let me start with some press reporting. I've read press claims that managers at both FAA and Boeing often agreed, I'm going to quote now, to table disagreements about technical issues in order to avoid delays, and that the relationship between your agency and Boeing was, quote, almost fraternal, end quote. Does that strike you as accurate in the time that you've been in your position?
Well, in the time that I've been in my position, and particularly since January 5th, that I would not use that to characterize the relationship, no.
Have you found, in looking back at your agency's conduct, are you worried about Boeing employees and FAA regulators being too close, potential conflicts of interest, or otherwise not the sort of rigorous oversight that's necessary being provided?
I think there have been various chapters in that relationship, and I think particularly with the development of the MAX, some of the delegation of authorities that took place, and some of the processes in that era showed some culture problems between the two. So we're very focused on making sure that happens, and we also monitor to make sure we're not having regulatory capture and rotating our inspectors and our executives to ensure that.
Let me ask you about some whistleblower allegations. Since Mr. Calhoun testified here back in June, a number of whistleblowers have contacted my office. One whistleblower told my office that Boeing would routinely try to schedule inspections based on which FAA investigators were coming, because some FAA investigators were known to be more inclined to provide sign-offs. I think we've got a quote about this. When this whistleblower brought this up to Boeing, namely this sort of disparate treatment by different investigators, he was brought into an office and told, don't push and do whatever your career can handle. My question is, does the FAA now or has it in the past allowed Boeing to schedule which inspections occur with specific investigators for certifying aircraft?
There are various types of inspections. Some of those are large paperwork inspections. Those tend to get scheduled. They're fairly intensive, weeks-long audits. The primary inspection happens on the floor, and particularly now that we have inspectors on the floor. I visited with the inspectors in Charleston and walked the floor with them. They have the opportunity to join the briefing meetings in the morning, the various level of management meetings, but more importantly, engage actually with the employees. So I think in this new regime we've had in place for the last 9 months, we have a much more of an ability to have a spontaneous inspection procedures and get better data that way.
Okay, so it sounds like it's a yes maybe as to paperwork inspections. As to in-person inspections, you are not currently allowing there to be scheduled inspections, is that right?
Those are more spontaneous, and in fact, if an inspector sees something he doesn't like it on the spot, he can say, can I see the paperwork? Can I talk to the person that did this, and effectively go through an inspection at that point.
Has the agency allowed scheduled inspections of any kind in the past?
Just of the audit nature, both with the quality systems for Boeing, which are basically auditing their manuals and procedures, and also similar inspections that happen with suppliers.
Let me ask you about another whistleblower report. This whistleblower, different person, told my office that she would report scores of technical issues, but when she did that, those reports were not well received by Boeing. No surprise given how Boeing has behaved. Here's the thing that particularly interested me. This whistleblower stated that if you go to the FAA, I'm going to quote her now, if you don't say you fear retaliation during an initial call with the FAA, you don't get whistleblower protection. I think we've got that quote as well. If you don't say you fear retaliation during the initial call with the FAA, you don't get whistleblower protection. Is that accurate?
That is not accurate. You get full whistleblower protection with each outreach.
Okay, so the FAA is not requiring whistleblowers to explicitly state that they fear retaliation in order to get whistleblower protection as defined by law. Is that correct?
Sir. Yes, sir.
What are you doing to ensure that any whistleblower who comes forward to you, whether from Boeing or anywhere else, is guaranteed the full whistleblower protections they are entitled to under the statute?
In 2023, we beefed up our department, added a number of inspectors, and they're all very well trained on what the protocols are. And really the key to this system working is having that confidentiality. It is really the cornerstone of the system working. So we encourage people to speak up, and we are bending over backwards to make sure they're protected.
Let me ask you about another whistleblower report. This whistleblower says that when she would go to the FAA with her concerns, these are reports of technical issues, other corner cutting by Boeing, that she often got relegated to an undesirable role. In other words, she was retaliated against. In one example, for instance, she did not receive overtime in her new role, which resulted in a $30,000 pay hit. And this whistleblower alleged Boeing routinely conducts retaliation in this way without raising any formal alarm bells. In other words, tries to retaliate, but sort of on the sly, as it were, and evade any FAA accountability or scrutiny. Are you aware of things like this happening?
I'm aware of allegations of retaliation, and it has been a focus as we look at the safety culture change that has to happen. A key part of that is a robust whistleblower program that does not have a retaliation. That's going to involve training of management so they know how to treat employees. And anytime we get an allegation of retaliation, we bring in the Department of Labor and OSHA to investigate as well.
And so has that happened recently? I mean, are you investigating? Have you brought in other relevant federal agencies to investigate possible cases of retaliation as it relates to Boeing?
We routinely would bring in the Department of Labor if there's a retaliation allegation.
You say routinely, but I guess I'm looking for, as it relates to Boeing, while you have been in your role, have there been instances where you've had to go after them for potential retaliation?
I can get that information and provide it to your office.
Okay, that would be helpful. In my time remaining here, let me just ask about something you testified to back in June when you were before the Commerce Committee. You were talking about changing your approach to inspecting Boeing production facilities. But one former FAA official has commented that 150 inspectors is a drop in the bucket compared to the amount of work that goes on at a typical Boeing production facility. Boeing says they have 170,000 employees. The Boeing facility in Renton, Washington, for example, where the 737s are produced, has 1 million square feet. How many inspectors do you have on the floor at Renton, for example?
I could give you the precise number. We currently have 11, and by the end of the year, we plan to have 13 inspectors there.
So you have 11 on a floor of 1 million square feet. There are 12,000 employees at Renton. Are those numbers adequate?
Our current assessment is this is a good start, and these inspectors are able to walk the line and talk to employees, and we feel like we're pretty well covered, but we will continue to evaluate that number as we go forward.
Well, my time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Johnson, for allowing me to ask these questions. I just want to say in closing that, listen, what's happened at Boeing is absolutely unacceptable. As I said to the CEO when he was sitting right where you are, for the CEO to have gotten a 45% pay increase as he did year over year while he wasn't paying his machinists out in the Pacific Northwest, while his planes are literally falling out of the sky, is absolutely reprehensible. They are destroying, he is destroying a great American company, and I don't buy this stuff that Boeing has a culture problem. Boeing has a leadership problem, and I just want to make sure, Mr. Whitaker, I'm glad you're doing the job you're doing. I want to make sure your agency is holding their feet to the fire. I worry about these reports that there's this sort of fratty culture between the FAA and Boeing. We need tough oversight there, and we're counting on you to provide that because, frankly, the American public deserve it when they get into an airplane, and the good people who work for Boeing deserve to be protected. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator.